Good morning, Minister. My name is George Kelsey and I'm an AgriFood advisor. I'm here to just give you a quick synopsis of what I think are the key points you need to take into this meeting. As I mentioned in my document, Labour has played a large role in our food and drink supply chain, and it is highly diverse and supports more than 1 in 10 jobs in the UK and contributes 112 billion to our UK economy. But for this to work, we need EU migrants. Between 12.3% and 23.7% of the 1.7 million food service labour force are non-UK EU nationals. In London alone, it's estimated a range of 25.7% to 38%, and so, Minister, the government should consider that there is a real need for an adequate supply of seasonal and full-time workers from the EU. When looking at trade, it's worth mentioning that the government should ensure regulations are properly designed and implemented to allow what the UK supply chain does what it does best, and that supplied British affordable food to the UK and the rest of the world. The UK and the EU 27 will continue to be each other's most important trade markets in food and drink. In 2016, 60% of the UK exports and 70% of UK imports in food, feed and drink were with countries in the EU. And so the government should consider the terms of ensuring that UK and UK trading partners can trade in a way that's frictionless. This is a clear priority for the food and drink supply chain. Another point to take into the meeting, sir, will be the low sterling value will make imported goods from all over the world cheaper, so the threat from imports is greater, not just from the EU. Overall, there could be a loss in free trade. Checks on goods coming across the border is going to slow things down, and I think it's important to mention whether there can be agreement for a free trade deal such as Norway and Switzerland have. We will also have to meet all EU trades as well as struggling to have a voice in what happens with new legislations. Food safety and availability in the UK food system is closely entwined with those of its EU neighbours. Because of the UK can't feed itself, its food security is heavily dependent on imports from the EU members of state. If this was to be altered, it could take years. The problem with a no Brexit deal, Minister, is that food safety controls could be suspended. This would mean a huge amount of perishable goods are going to be stuck at the borders, as well as a lack of food safety if no one is checking the goods that are delayed. Delays at borders and ports are only going to have an effect on perishable goods, but also other businesses as well. For example, the just-in-time and some of the daily delivery companies are going to be affected very negatively. On top of this, the UK is the 3rd largest beef producer in the EU and will produce 15.1 billion litres of milk. Not to mention that as well in the UK up to 30% of its food that's consumed comes from the EU. This is something that could potentially bring up with other ministers. The effect on the supply chain. Food manufacturers with complicated supply chains, for example, they source food and drink from one country, process it in another, and then sell it in another country, are getting ready for a rather bumpy ride, as 2 negative impacts are inbound. 1, increased tariffs and potential double taxation issues. 2, consumer controls are a real concern, both physical and in terms of border cross checks and searches, as well as administrative with such stuff as documentation and organisation. But Minister, it's worth mentioning that should the trade barriers strengthen, then regional food production is likely to become more important. This means that in areas of low productivity, this may lead to price rising, while places with already high productivity may experience glut, where overproduction causes and leads to a decrease in prices. For many food and drink manufacturers, there can be good news on the horizon. With the possibility of the removal of EU import restrictions and tariffs, will help some companies source from non-EU markets more cost efficiently. Lastly, Minister, I want to acknowledge the special relationship the UK has between the UK and Ireland, and might be worth bringing up solutions on workforce and border regulations, and the possibility of a continued non-tariff and seamless trade across both sides. Most of all, Minister, maintain consumer confidence in the UK food and drink industry.